Well Studio. We welcome now Henry Barbour, a GOP strategist. Henry, always good to see you, sir.
Hey Gerard, how you doing, man?
I'm doing great. We've got Election Day, of course, across the state of Mississippi, and so far reports indicate that turnout is rather light. Are you surprised at this, Henry?
I'm not. I mean, you figure the presidential is driving it, and with Nikki Haley dropping out after Super Tuesday, when Trump has just been running up the score, um, there's just not as much urgency. I think, of course, we have the Senate primary, Senator Wicker's seat, and he has two opponents. So I know there's interest in that race, and certainly I know Senator Wicker is hoping people will go out and vote because lower turnout is when you can have something strange happen that you might not expect otherwise.
What do you expect in that race, Henry? You think we may proceed to a runoff there?
I don't think so. Um, I think Senator Wicker is popular, has done really well. If Republicans take the majority in the Senate, which we should, he'll be chairman of the Senate Armed Services Committee, which is tremendously important for Mississippi and all the military operations and as well as jobs that can be brought into Mississippi and expanded. So I think the question is he going to be north of 60? And I suspect he probably will be, in that range. But I think he's going to win. His two opponents have not had much in the way of paid advertising. I know they're hustling around, but I expect that Senator Wicker will prevail in today's primary.
So you said something about, of course, if the senator does prevail, he would become the chairman of the Armed Services Committee, and that if, in fact, the Republicans flip the Senate. You said you expect that to happen. I've been sort of watching those key races with interest, Ohio, Montana, for example, Arizona. How do you feel about that?
Well, I feel like right now Republicans have a good political environment, and the number one reason for that is 82% of Americans think we need a new president. They're not satisfied with Joe Biden. Just feel like the job is probably beyond him, and he's just not quite up to it. And the other advantage that Republicans have with the Senate is just the numbers. There are 23 Democrats that are up and only 11 Republicans. And frankly, the 11 Republicans all are in safe seats. As you mentioned, Arizona, Montana, Ohio are three good potential pickups for Republicans. They're certainly toss-up races. And then Senator Manchin's seat in West Virginia, he elected not to run. And the governor, Jim Justice, is running. And that is, a likely Republican pickup. And so Republicans have a good chance of picking up a couple seats. And, that would be terrific. We're at 49 Republicans, 48 Democrats, and 3 independents who caucus with the Democrats. So they're essentially 51-49. So Republicans got a good chance, and I think that bodes well for Mississippi if Senator Wicker is reelected, which I expect.
Okay. What about the recent changes in leadership at the RNC? Henry, how do you feel about that?
So I was at the Republican National Committee meeting last week where essentially the Trump campaign took over the RNC. And that sounds a little dramatic, but if you look at past presidential elections, Romney, McCain, George W. Bush, it's the normal thing to happen when you end up with a presumptive nominee, which Donald Trump is now for the Republicans, for that campaign to put their people in the building at the Republican National Committee. Now, what's unusual, this is the first time in a presidential election year, Gerard, where they have gotten rid of the chair since Eisenhower. And so that was not necessarily expected. But so Ronna McDaniel is out as RNC chair, and Michael Watley, who has been the chair in North Carolina and a successful chairman, took over as chairman. He won unanimously. And then former President Trump's daughter-in-law, Laura Trump, was elected co-chair. And I think that wasn't necessarily expected, but I will say I think she impressed the RNC members. Most of us have, had not met her before. Number one, in her tall shoes, she was like 6'2". She kind of towered over the new chairman. And in many respects, she just kind of outshined him from the podium. I mean, she's an excellent speaker. And I'll imagine she could be a great fundraiser if she'll focus on that, because who's not going to take her phone call that's on the sort of Republican side? So there's a lot of potential there. They're making a lot of staff changes. A guy named Chris LaCivita, who's helping run the Trump campaign, has basically taken over the day-to-day operations of the RNC. And LaCivita has run lots of campaigns over the years, very familiar with the Republican Party and state parties, and a guy that I have a lot of confidence in. And so I feel like Chris will do well running and managing. But there is a lot of press out yesterday about the big changes at the RNC, and that they're getting rid of about 60 RNC staffers or so, including several senior staffers. So big changes there. But again, it's pretty normal during a presidential election year to have these sorts of changes.
I noticed that the current president, the DNC, in terms of cash on hand, almost lap the former President Trump, and the RNC. Is this of concern to you, Henry? A big time contentious election, you got almost double the money.
Yeah, it is a concern, and it certainly needs to be a focus both for the Trump campaign and for the RNC. They got to pick it up. Last year was not a great fundraising year, and if you look at, President Trump spent $50 million out of one of the super PACs paying his legal bills. And so that's sucking down cash in a serious way. I think the advantage that Republicans have is the environment. I think there's an expectation that Joe Biden's not going to get reelected, and Republicans could win the Senate as well. And we'll see about the House. But if people expect that Trump's going to win and the Republicans are going to hold the Congress, that fundraising should pick up, but they've really got to put their foot on the gas. I know the RNC needs to raise $250, $300 million this year, and the Trump campaign's got to raise, even more. So there's a lot of work to do on the fundraising side to kind of get to a level playing field between the R's and the D's.
Yeah, and for what it's worth, of note is within 24 hours of last week's State of the Union address, the Biden campaign brought in about $10 million.
Yeah, he kind of fed.
Go ahead. Yeah.
No, go ahead.
I was just going to say, I wonder if that's just indicative of the sentiment that, hey, maybe this guy can go another 4 years, because he certainly did look different in that short hour, just from a physical and mental cognitive perspective. But then I just played some sound. Within 24 hours, he's back to his old self. It kind of makes you wonder what's going on, but he was able to haul in another $10 million. We're at a break right now, Henry. If you can hang around, we can dig into some more politics.
Yes, sir. Yes, sir.
All right. Great. We got Henry Barbour, GOP strategist, on the line here. We're at middays in the Element Wealth studio. We're talking to Henry Barbour, GOP strategist. So, Henry, we've talked a little bit about the upcoming, of course, presidential election headlining the ticket, and then the Senate, which at this point you think may flip to Republicans by a couple of seats based on your analysis. What do you think about the House, which is already has Republicans with control, but by a very slim margin? Do you think they'll improve that, or subject to losing that and turning it over to Democrat control?
It's really kind of iffy toss up, I would say, overall. We have such a thin majority. Redistricting, we're losing some seats here and there, including one in Alabama, down in the Montgomery, Mobile area. It's likely lost, I'll say. So it's the House is iffy. I will say if Donald Trump can really run strong and really focus on the politics of addition, making more and more, I'll say, Republicans, but also independents and suburbanite voters who maybe he lost in 20, make them feel welcome, make them feel included. That you don't have to agree with him 100% of the time to be welcome, to be part of, his team. Then President Trump has the ability, I think, against Joe Biden to really provide a lot of momentum, Gerard, that could pull the House. And, we end up with Mike Johnson, the speaker, having a 4 or 5 seat advantage, which is mighty thin. But I don't think anybody's going to open up any big advantage in the House this time, it seems to me.
Yeah, I'm with you. So you think that perhaps Donald Trump headlining the ticket for Republicans, and that he'll mount a strong campaign that could influence these critical House elections?
Doesn't mean he will. Harvard Harris survey was out about a week ago. 82% of Americans said we need a new president.
Yeah.
And in that same poll that I think is very encouraging to Republicans and particularly to President Trump, they asked, did you approve or disapprove of the job that Donald Trump did when he was president? 64% of 18 to 24-year-olds approved. 57% of Hispanics, 43% of Asian Americans, and 40% of African Americans. And what that tells you is there are a lot of minority voters and younger voters who have historically voted Democrat, probably never voted Republican, who are open. But you got to reach out to them in the right way, just like I think former President Trump has got to reach out to the suburbanite voters in places like Atlanta and Phoenix and Milwaukee and Philadelphia, Pittsburgh, in the swing states, and make them feel included and have the right tone, a tone that says, you know what, I'm here to help all of America. We got to get America back on track and talk about issues that unite us, not divide us. President Trump is 100% capable of doing that. But we all know that President Trump sometimes goes for the more divisive language, which I think feeds his base of, so-called MAGA voters. But they only are a certain percentage, Gerard. And if, you want to get the majority and the north of 270 electoral votes and maybe even over, 300, President Trump's got to broaden that. And, politics is about math, and it's about addition, not subtraction.
So don't you think, though, Henry, that those loyal sort of MAGA voters, those electors, they probably reside mostly in the states that are safe for a Republican and safe for Donald Trump where he needs the boost, which is what I think is where the election is won and lost, or in these 4 or 5 so-called swing states where you got a lot of voters that really can just vote either way in any given election.
Yeah, well, I mean, there are definitely MAGA voters in places like Wisconsin and Arizona.
Sure.
Yeah, but as you say, and this is why I'm talking about, suburbanite, mostly female, mostly college educated voters. Trump needs to go get them, and they're not happy with the president, Joe Biden. They feel like we need a new president, and so there is this opportunity, and the Trump campaign, I will say, really good staff. I mean, they're doing a good job, and President Trump can connect like nobody's business, but it can go the other way sometimes too, and that's where I just think he needs to target these swing voters that you're talking about, Gerard, and talk to them about the issues that they care about. Safer communities where people are worried about crime, people are worried about the border. People are worried about inflation. It keeps inching up. The economy. They're worried about the wars going on in Israel and Gaza and Ukraine. There's a lot that President Biden just seems like it's just kind of beyond him. He can't seem to make up his mind about Israel and Gaza and frankly, I think he's kind of failed to really lead on Ukraine. He says he's for Ukraine and for getting the Russians out of there, but he's never really talked about it. He's never made it a priority.
Yeah. Other than
just like the border,
more money, it's more money, and the same thing on the border. I mean, I think the way I'd characterize it, Henry, and get your take on this, is that he doesn't really acknowledge that the problems that most Americans are concerned about, the issues they're most concerned about, are even problems. He doesn't really give that any credence. That the border's a problem, inflation's a problem, the situation overseas is a problem, crime is a problem.
I think the border.
Too.
Yeah, the border to me is a good example of he ignored the border, and it's just out of control. People just swarming the country, coming in. We don't know who's coming in. It's a terrible precedent that we have, and obviously dangerous. And he ignored it for 3 years, and then all of a sudden they started talking about a bill in Congress, and he wants to now sort of blame Republicans. But what has he done as president? And if he had just followed the model that Donald Trump had on the border, we wouldn't have these troubles that we're having now in Texas and well beyond.
Yeah, I've actually said on the show, Henry, that I think had he not passed the American Rescue Plan, which I think was the major cause of the boost in inflation, and just retain the Trump policies at the border, he'd probably be in pretty good shape going into the general election.
He'd be in a lot better shape, that's for sure. Afghanistan, I think, makes him look weak, and people still remember that. But you're right. You take away the inflation issue, and you have some kind of order at the border. He'd be in a whole lot better shape. I mean, look at all the Democrat mayors in blue states that are mad at him about the border, and they finally got a taste of all these people coming into their cities. What particularly Texas has been going through for a long time.
But as you recall, he was with those policies, he was adamant to just erase everything Donald Trump had done, and it was more about emotion and personality than it was just sensible policy. And I think he's paying for that now.
He is absolutely paying for it. And look, the voters, whether it's a state election or Senate election or national election like president, they want results. They want safer community. They want better schools. They want decent jobs. They just want results. And man, he's really failed.
I agree. Henry, always good to talk to you. Really appreciate your insight as always, and I'm sure we'll be talking to you more as we approach the upcoming big-time general election in the fall. Thank you a lot, sir. Appreciate it.
You're a man. Thank you.
We're coming right back, folks, in the Element Wealth studio.